Welcome, friend. I'm TK, your tour guide to the past, and you are listening to For the Love of History, the podcast where we talk about world history, women's history, and weird history. Many of you delicious donuts may be listening to this episode while you are at the office or while you're working at your job. Many of you are cursing whatever God put you in this timeline where late-stage capitalism is squeezing the life out of most human beings, running us ragged, and forcing us to run in the rat race that is the job market of the post-COVID world. But hey, at least you don't have to wipe the Mad King's bumhole or open up a submarine at the bottom of the ocean in the middle of a minefield. Yes, we have our disgusting and dangerous jobs here in the 21st century. However, we at least have labor rights and some semblance of safety regulations. And I promise you, dear one, that you will kiss your office water cooler after you learn about today's topic: history's worst jobs. And I highly recommend that you stay until the end of this episode because these jobs get progressively more dangerous and disgusting. But before that, it is time to do some housekeeping so that we can keep the lights on here at For the Love of History headquarters and keep the history helper kitties out of the streets. So first on the docket today is the History BFF trip to Japan from August 24th to the 30th. There are only 4 more early bird spots available, and if you would like to secure your spot, all you need is a 25% down payment to secure your place on the History BFF trip. We will be going to Osaka, Kyoto, Nara, we'll be going to temples, we'll be having some of the most delicious food you will ever have in your entire life, we'll go to a blood temple, we'll make some matcha, and so much more. And as a fun little bonus, my birthday is on the 25th of August, so we'll also be doing a bonus little birthday celebration as well. So if you would like to go, you can go down to the show notes and check out all the information. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to comment, DM me, anything on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube. Next order of business on the docket today is our 5-year anniversary live Q&A. For the Love of History turned 5 on April 1st. And if you don't know the reason why I launched the podcast on April 1st, maybe that's something I'll talk about in the live episode. So if you have any questions that you would like me to answer during the live, you can comment them down below. You can DM me on Instagram. You can use one of the many question boxes that will be up on Instagram stories. Any of that is fine. Send them to me in an email if you want to, and I will be doing the live episode next week on Thursday so that I can still upload it on Friday like usual. So I'm very excited for that, and I just want to say thank you so much for being here with me for these 5 years. And I will do a full emotional spiel, I'm sure, on Thursday of next week. And with that, it is time to grab your rubber gloves and your hazmat suit, and let's get to it. There is literally a history for everything, from the history of zippers to the history of fake eyelashes and the history of jobs. For many of us, we go to a job or multiple jobs every single day. I myself teach by day and podcast by night. And up until a few months ago, I never thought about the history of jobs until my YouTube algorithm randomly decided to show me old reruns of Tony Robinson's BBC series, The Worst Jobs in History. The series covers jobs from the Romans to the Victorians, and you know those little freak-a-leaks had some weird jobs. So that got me thinking about the very first jobs and how the idea of a job came about in the first place. So before we dive into the literal shit that is in this episode, let's talk about how jobs started and how they developed. We will probably never know what the very first job in history was, but we can assume it was a job that had to do with community survival. As humans moved away from a nomadic lifestyle to community and agricultural-based living, the concept of a job kind of just naturally evolved. Jobs during this time of early humanity weren't like jobs where you get paid a salary, but rather jobs done for the survival of yourself and the community. People couldn't do or produce everything that was needed to survive, so they divided and conquered. They delegated, if you will, and I in fact will. At first, they were simple tasks because the structure of society was simple and needs were not as complex. But as communities flourished and society expanded, the jobs began to diversify. The more complex a society became, the greater diversity in jobs they had. And as the needs of a society changed, jobs were created to fill those needs. And those needs changed with technology, population increase, all sorts of fun human stuff. And consequently, some jobs became obsolete. And after this episode, you will thank the sweet, sweaty, crocodile-y Lord Sobek that the following jobs have disappeared. So today we will be breaking our terrible jobs into two categories: the disgusting and the dangerous. So just a little word of warning to you, dear one, it might be time to pack up your lunch or finish off whatever snack it is you're eating, because we're starting out with history's most disgusting jobs. Sin and the damnation of your eternal soul. Few things in 17th century Europe, specifically Scotland, England, and Wales, were as important as your immortal soul and the very impending doom of eternal damnation. If you were a person in the 1600s, your daily life was consumed by religion and sin. Mostly sin. Very, very obsessed with sin. People were freaked out about going to the downstairs place and having their soul burn in hellfire for all of time. Thankfully, in the late 1600s, the Christian God of the time was like, hey man, just confess your sins, okay? Before you die, do a little last rites, do a little confessional, have a little bit of wafer or whatever, drink some wine, and then you and I will be squaresies, and you can skip your little penitent tookus up into heaven, and we'll be good. So when things were looking like Jesus was about to call your number, a priest would be called and summoned to give you the last rites and your final confession. But what happened if the priest came too late and you had already shed your mortal coil, or came too early and the confession magic wore off before you took a stroll over the Rainbow Bridge? In that very unfortunate case, your family would call a sin eater. Oh yeah. A person to literally and spiritually eat your sins. Usually this job was done by an extremely destitute person whose immediate need was food and not a squeaky clean soul. So how does one eat sin? Well, it was a fairly simple ordeal. The family of the deceased would call up the sin eater after their loved one passed away. Then they would place bread and salt on the chest of their loved one and wait for it to soak up all the sinful juices that person had accumulated since their last confession. Or if they were like in a pinch or in a bit of a time crunch, then the loaf would just be kind of like waved around the deceased person's body like a sin fly trap is the only thing that I can think of in that moment. So after all that sin was soaked up, the sin eater would arrive at the house and begin eating the sin-soaked bread and salt from off of the dead person's body, like a really morbid version of the human sushi platter. You know, like in Las Vegas, you can go and have you can like eat sushi off of a naked person's body. It's like the horrific version of that, and I don't know why that popped into my brain, but that's where my freak-a-leak of a noggin went. Anyways, the eating of the sin bread would be done in complete silence, and once they were done, the sin eater would say a prayer, something to the effect of, I give easement and rest now to the dear man, come down, not the lanes or in the meadows, and for that peace I pawn my soul. the ceremony would end, and the sin eater was tossed a few coins. Now, one would think that the family would be superdy-duperdy thankful and act kindly to the person that just gobbled up grandpa's sins so he wouldn't burn in hell for all eternity. But alas, dear one, it was very much the opposite. The sin eater would often be chased away, or in some cases, attacked, because the living, much like a playground full of second graders, did not want to catch sin cooties. So rather than being a hero, they were a social pariah. Because it was believed that the sin eaters took one for the team and damned their own soul to eternal hellfire by performing this job. And obviously, someone with that much sin all up in their body must have been bad luck. They were shunned by their entire community, even though they had an arguably super-duper important role. The practice of sin eating lasted from the late 1600s to 1906. And on a scale of 1 to 5 vomit emojis, I would give this one a solid 2, because it's kind of gross to eat off of a dead person, but not as gross as managing the bowel movements of a mad king. Which brings us to our next disgusting job, the groom of the stool, which I think should be called the Baron of the BM, but that's just me. That's just hilarious, wonderful sense of humor me. So who created this position? King Henry VIII is one of the most hated and well-known kings in European history. And while his life in some ways was tragic, he was also a raging asshole. And what does a raging asshole need? Obviously, someone to keep that asshole's asshole clean and thoroughly monitored. What a transition. And I do have to say that is one of my best transitions that I have ever made on this podcast. So, Mad King Henry VIII, being the absolute freak that he was, created the position of Groom of the Stool, a gentleman whose job it was to assist the king in his privy chambers, aka the dookie closet. Get it? Like Duke and the dookie is in poo-poo. Oh God, I have the sense of humor of a 4th grader. Initially, the Groom of the Stool's duties entailed carrying the royal stool, aka a velvet porta potty, from palace to palace, being on call for the king at a moment's notice to assist him in the dookie closet, and also monitoring the forbidden fudge and reporting its status to the royal physician, and finally assisting with all bathroom related things from undressing to cleaning up after the deed was done. And quick note on this, I couldn't find any evidence that the Groom of the Stool was actually wiping the hiney of the king, other than Tony Robinson's show that like briefly alluded to it. So take that hiney wiping with a grain of salt and just know that most sources just said assisted with cleanup, and that might just be a polite way to say the Groom of the Stool wiped the king's ass, or just a general reference to assisting with cleanup, whether that meant cleaning out the velvet throne of caca or other things. So just keep that in mind. Now, one might assume that a person of lower social status would be the one in this position. They were dealing with caca after all, but no. The Baron of the BM was a highly coveted position because you were one of the only people, if not the only person, in the kingdom that had one-on-one time with the king during his most vulnerable state, going to the potty. Personally, I feel like I would agree to anything mid taking the Browns to the Super Bowl, if you know what I mean. In my opinion, the hour of the Hershey Kiss occupies that same weird space and time that being on the phone does. Like, you can get someone to agree to pretty much anything or do anything while on the phone. Have you seen those videos where like a mom is talking on the phone and her kids like bring her a bunch of stuff. I have done that to my mother on several occasions. So the groom of the stool really could sway the goings on in the kingdom almost more than anyone else could. There were other perks of the job as well, like getting the king's hand-me-downs and old palace furniture. And by old, I mean like it was probably used for a little bit and then they were like, oh, we need some new ones. So that's a pretty great perk. So with those kinds of benefits, the houses of court would do their darndest to get someone on their side into the poo-poo position, or get the groom of the stool on their side. Later on, after its creation by King Henry VIII, the position developed to have more responsibilities, like being in charge of a king's personal finance and so on. The position really took off, and each king made it their own, with the custom finally coming to an end with King Edward VII in 1906. Nope, 1901. And for this disgusting job, I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5 puke emojis. Even if the groom of the stool may not have been actively wiping the king's derriere, there's something about being in the same room as they did their business and actively having to stare at forbidden fudge and note its features and then report those notes to a physician sounds like a special kind of hell to me. I don't want to spend the majority of my day just staring at shit. Like, that's not what I'm trying to do. And shout out to all the toddler parents who have to do that and you don't get the king's hand-me-downs. I'm so sorry, you are doing the Lord's work. But the groom of the stool is not nearly as hellish as our next job, the Tosher. Don't let the super cute girly pop name fool you. Tosher sounds adorable, but this job came out of the Victorian era. And I don't need to tell you how freaky those little weirdos were about literally everything. The whole era had no chill, zero chill, and they had to make literally everything weird and awkward and horrible. If you are in a position to do so, I invite you to close your eyes and picture the London sewer system. You're about 30 to 40 feet under the city of London in a brick and mortar tube that has been decaying for over a century. You could literally scoop out the wall in some places because it is so old and decrepit. It's dark and it smells like a combination of dookie, urine, dead animals, stale water, and unimaginable decay from the past century. These tunnels go for miles, and there was, at this time, no map. You just traversed this hellscape on vibes alone, all the while sifting through Sobek knows how old detritus left by a million Londoners. This position was created out of necessity by the poor of London society. The poverty in 19th century England was unmatched in Europe. London had experienced a huge population boom, and the income inequality was at an all-time high. So, out of necessity, people of the lower class took whatever jobs they could and created whatever jobs they could. And among the most lucrative of these jobs was the Tosher. Day in and day out, they would scour through the mud, muck, and literal shit that filled the sewers at low tide. Now, why in the good name of the almighty Morgan Freeman would anyone do that? To what end? To what purpose did they go down there? Well, my delicious donut, they were treasure hunting, looking for any scrap of usable material from discarded fabric to lost gems, jewels, bits of metal, bones, and sometimes actual money. It is banana sandwich crazy what ends up in the sewers. I watched a YouTube video one time about the sewage system in, I think it was New York or something like that, and the craziest shit shows up. Actual poop, but also really weird things that make you go, In what scenario is someone dropping this down a sewer or flushing this down a toilet? So they found a bunch of stuff that ended up making them so much money. According to Henry Mayhew, who interviewed some of these Toshers in the late 1800s and wrote about them in his book London Labor and London Poor, published in 1851, these fellas would make about 6 shillings a day, which was about 50 pounds in today's money. And that worked out to be about 20,000 pounds annually, which is a huge salary for the poor in London. But all that money came at a cost. Along with spending your day sloshing and picking through every disturbing substance that you can imagine, and some that you couldn't, Toshers had to deal with a danger that lurked behind every corner of the sewers. Like I said before, the sewers were decrepit, and they began falling apart long before the Victorian era. So tunnel collapses were not unusual. And these sewers could be up to 40 feet underground. So if a tunnel collapsed, it was like, it was not good. Nobody was gonna be able to come find you down there. They also had to deal with gas explosions that also often led to tunnel collapse. And I don't know if you're on the same part of the internet that I am, but I have seen my fair share of exploding porta potties because they were not properly fumigated. So imagine just years and years and decades of buildup of these gases from not only bodily excrement, but also decaying animals and all sorts of gross things. And I could explain the science of poop gas, but I will let Hank Green do that because I would like to eat my lunch after this. And it's really gross. But if you asked a Tosher what they feared the most while slogging through the tunnels, it wouldn't be the collapses and it wouldn't be the gas explosions. It would be the rats. According to one of Mayhew's informants named Jack Black, great name by the way, the rat and moles are destroyers to Her Majesty when the bite is a bad one. It festers and forms a hard core in the ulcer, which throbs very much indeed. This core is as big as a boiled fish's eye, what a unit of measurement, and as hard as stone. Eye generally cuts the bite out clean with a lancet and squeezes. Ugh, the imagery. I've been bitten nearly everywhere, even where I can't name to you, sir. So, rats were just biting people with reckless abandon. But if you escaped a rat attack with just a bite, you were considered one of the lucky ones. Another informant of Mayhew's goes on to describe a rat attack by saying they would be slaying thousands in their struggle for life, but most ended badly. Unless he was in company so the rats dared not attack, the sewer hunter was doomed. He would fight on using his hoe till at last the swarms of savage things overpowered him. Then he would go down fighting, his body torn to pieces and the tattered remains submerged in untreated sewage, until a few days later it became just another example of the detritus of the tunnels, drifting toward the Thames and its inevitable discovery by another gang of Toshers, who would find the remains of their late colleague, picked to the very bone. What? Did you know that rats ate people? I thought that was just a thing that happened in like 007 spy movies where they would torture people with rats. Or the Saw movies. I did not realize that that was a real thing, that rats would swarm you if you were by yourself and literally tear you to shreds. Wow. The job of Tosher, though lucrative, gets a full 5 out of 5 puke emojis, and it gets a solid 3.5 out of 5 danger emojis, making it the most disgusting, but not the most dangerous. Even in the 21st century, we have some extremely dangerous jobs, like king crab fishers, deep sea oil rig welders, deep sea divers that have to have like those compression chambers like halfway up. It's crazy. We have a lot of dangerous jobs, but thankfully now we do have some workers' regulations and safety precautions. But unfortunately for the workers of yesteryear, those didn't really exist until much later. And when we look just at the surface of job history, especially in the Victorian and Industrial Revolution days, the dangerous jobs outnumber the safe ones. We were literally just dumb babies, and I don't know how the human species made it to the year 2025 because we did some dumb stuff, but I digress. Because of this extremely long list, it was really hard to pick which ones I wanted to cover. There were so many honorable mentions, like the Victorian treadmills, who were prisoners that worked 12 hours grinding grain on a makeshift treadmill that would like fall off and their legs would get crushed. It was a whole thing. There were also plague body collectors who went around collecting the dead from one of the most communicable diseases ever. And then coal trappers, who were children who worked in the total darkness of coal mines, opening and closing mine shafts at the age of like 4. While all of these were incredibly dangerous, I wanted to bring you the worst of the worst and jobs that weren't usually talked about. And I found the 3 jobs I think were the most dangerous. So let's start with a job that on the surface doesn't seem all that bad. Since ancient China and Egypt, physicians and healers have been using leeches to balance humors and drain excess blood that was believed to cause all sorts of sickness. And I'll link the history of surgery episode where we talk more about that balancing of humors situation. But that's about all you need to know right now. Use of leeches has always been popular, but in the 1830s, demand exceeded supply by a lot. And one of the problems with supplying this demand was the fact that leeches are seasonal, and you could only get them during the summertime, and in the winter time, if you didn't have any leeches, it was a big problem for sick people and physicians who were curing people of their imbalanced humors by letting Satan's little worms suck on their blood. So once again, the poor, out of necessity, began becoming leech collectors. And the people who would most often become leech collectors were women, particularly young women and much older women who did not have access to any other means of employment. When I first came across this job, I thought to myself, well, how dangerous could it possibly be to just pick up some blood grubs from the river? It couldn't be that bad, right? Oh, how wrong I was, dear one. How very, very wrong I was. To catch a leech, these women would wade into the water up to about their thighs and let the little buggers attach themselves to their bare legs. Then, one by one, they would pluck them off and put them in a special little basket. And having 1 or 2 leeches on your body was not gonna kill you. You were gonna be fine. But to have hundreds and maybe even thousands of leeches on you every single day for several months is gonna have some incredibly detrimental side effects. You see, leeches have a special enzyme in their saliva that make it pretty much impossible for the blood to coagulate. And this anticoagulation substance makes it much easier for the leeches to suck out your blood like a giant Slurpee. No one wants little chunky bits in their blood smoothie. So this anticoagulant is not a big deal in small doses, and it's actually really good for medical uses. But when you have that many leeches on you every single day, it's gonna cause problems and symptoms similar to anemia, which includes but is not limited to headaches, dizzy spells, extreme exhaustion, and slight blood poisoning. And what made it even worse and exacerbated these symptoms was leech collectors would often turn to alcohol, which they thought was going to fix their problems. And to make the situation even worse, leech collectors would often turn to alcohol, which they thought was going to fix their problems, but it exacerbated their symptoms and oftentimes led to death. And for these reasons, I'm going to give the job of leech collector 3 out of 5 danger emojis. For this next job, surprisingly, we don't actually have the Victorians to blame for it because it's more of a modern, terrible job. Now we're going to fast forward in time to World War I and the profession of can opener. And no, my sweet little sprinkly donut, we're not talking about the kind of cans that hold food and little Vienna sausages. Nay, nay, dear one. I'm talking about sunken submarines at the bottom of the ocean. During World War I, extremely sensitive information was kept inside of submarines due to how difficult they were to get into, meaning the information would be safe from enemy eyeballs. Being able to commandeer a submarine would have given the other side a huge advantage in the war, but there wasn't really a way to delicately sink a submarine, and commandeering one of them was even more difficult. And that is why the job of a can opener or underwater submarine opener came to be, because sinking a submarine was totally doable. After a submarine was sunk, it would be the job of the can opener to go down and open up the submarine and see what information could be salvaged and used against the enemy, which is already a dangerous enough job. Opening up a highly pressurized metal can that is likely to explode if you open it in the wrong way, and by the way, you were underwater in a shitty 1910s scuba suit. And I don't know if you have seen those, but they look like horrible B-movie space costumes. They were not great. Not the kind of thing you would want to be wearing if you were under the water next to an explosive. But what really sent this job over the top and secured its place in my top 3 most dangerous jobs in history is the fact that the submarines often went down in the middle of underwater minefields. Do you know in like the one in Finding Nemo? Remember when Nemo and Dory are trying to escape the sharks and they go into that field with those, like, the chains and the metal balloons at the top of them? That kind of minefield. These poor dudes were going down in shitty scuba gear into a Finding Nemo type minefield, which is just crazy to me. So some poor unfortunate soul was going underwater in shitty scuba gear and opening up an extremely explosive metal can surrounded by a bunch of boom boom balloons. So you can imagine that the survival rate of this job was extremely low. And I'm telling you this right now, you could not pay me enough money to go down there and do that job. And therefore, it gets a 4 out of 5 danger emojis from me. And finally, dear one, the moment that we have all been waiting for. The most dangerous job in history, according to moi. The match girls of Victorian England. If you are even a casual history lover, you have heard of the radium girls. And they are definitely the ones that get more attention than their unfortunate sisters in sorrow. The Matchstick girls. The history of the matchstick is fascinating and disgusting and incredibly dangerous. The first single-use matchstick was created in 1669 when this alchemist named Henning Brandt decided to boil down his own urine in the hopes of creating gold. And I hear you right now, TK, why on Morgan Freeman's Earth would anyone do that? And the answer to that question, dear one, is this dude, Brandt, the alchemist, thought that pee looked a lot like gold in that it was yellow. So in his mind, he was like, hey, I'm just gonna boil it down and I'll probably make gold. Sir, what? Also, whose pee were you collecting? Because I really hope it was your own. Do I hope it was your own? I don't know. volunteer urine. Anyways, I can't decide which one is more gross. So he boiled down the urine and did not, in fact, create gold. Surprise Pikachu face, okay? The substance that remained was a green, glowing, almost like paste that exploded when it was exposed to air. But Brandt was not interested in the slightest because his goal was to find gold and not explodey boom boom paste. So this mystery substance kind of fell out of history for 2 whole centuries until John Walker from England discovered it once again, but didn't really know what to do with it, so it once again went to the wayside until 1829, when a man named Samuel Jones created Lucifers, which is an incredibly badass name for single-use matches. And I think we should bring that name back, but not these matches particularly, because these Lucifers were incredibly dangerous. They were made of phosphorus, and when they were struck and lit, the gas that was expelled from the matchstick was like literally killing people on the reg. So that was not good. In the next year, an attempt was made to make a safer matchstick, and a gentleman named Charles Surley used white phosphorus as a match tip head. But in a horrendous twist of irony, he actually made a more dangerous matchstick that killed babies if they accidentally started sucking on the match, and it took out grown men who smelled the fumes of the matchstick. But hey, people needed more handy ways to smoke their various tobacco accoutrements, so they went into production. And despite how very lethal these matchsticks were, by the end of the 19th century, 25 factories in England employed over 4,000 people, the majority of whom were women, with 35% of them being girls under the age of 18. And these single-use matchsticks were like, they were going like hotcakes, or something that sells like Stanleys. They were going like Stanleys. And the condition, despite them being incredibly dangerous, and even more dangerous to the people who were producing them. The conditions in which these women and girls worked under was atrocious on its own. They worked 15-hour shifts, and it was a pay-to-work kind of a situation where they were forced to bring their own glue and brushes and other material to create the matchsticks. And they also had to pay fines for extremely, like, teeny tiny, not important misdemeanors, like having a dirty feet, not just a singular foot, or an untidy workbench. They were fined for talking, they were fined for having a burnt match in their work area, and so much more. And the majority of these fines exceeded the actual paycheck that these women were getting, which strong-armed them into being the perfect employees that they possibly could, and also keeping them chained to this job with no option for escape. But what was even worse than the working conditions was the health issues that these women faced by making these matches. Health issues like phossy brain, lung problems, phossy jaw, and general bone decay. Much like the radium girls who were licking their paintbrushes that contained a highly toxic substance, these women and girls were inhaling white phosphorus that was leaching the calcium from their bones and necrotizing their jaws, their teeth, and any open sore that they had. 11% of the matchstick girls developed phossy jaw, which was a necrotization of the jawbone that would continue to decay and fester unless the jaw was taken out and every piece of contaminated bone was extracted. Any remnants of white phosphorus in a wound or in a bone made the healing literally impossible. And even though these women and girls had their bones and brains literally rotting away, nothing was done to help them. And often they were kicked out of the factory that they were working for having a disturbing appearance if the necrotization left the bone and went into the skin. But the story is not all bad. And much like we often do as women, the girls were forced to save themselves. And in 1888, there was a massive Matchstick girl strike that forced new labor laws and protections for the women and girls in the factories. And not long after that, other labor laws were created to protect the workers in poverty and incredibly dangerous jobs. So the job of Matchstick girl not only gets a 5 out of 5 danger emojis, but they also get a 5 out of 5 stars for being really fucking badass and helping to start a workers' revolution. Well, dear one, we have come to our final thought today, which is a list of videos that I recommend because any one of these jobs could have been turned into a 30 to 45 minute long podcast, but I just wanted to give a quick overview. So I will be pointing you into the direction of some of my absolute favorite creators who have created videos on this topic before, such as the incomparable Tony Robinson and his series, The Worst Jobs in History, Kaz Rowe, who is okay, cool, and I want to be friends with them so bad, and of course, the OGs of classic YouTube history, Weird History. And all of these episodes will be linked in the description below. And Kaz, if you ever want to come on my podcast or you want to do like a collaboration, please just let me know. My DMs are always open. You're so cool. Be my friend. Is that weird? Maybe it's weird. Anyways, it's fine. It's fine. Casual. That's not weird. That's how adults make friends, right? Yeah. Yeah. And for my final thought, I would love to know what job you think is the most disgusting and dangerous. And if there was a job that I left out and you think it should be added to the list, please let me know because I would love to do another episode on this topic. Well, my delicious little glazed donut with chocolate sprinkles on the top, our episode has come to an end, meaning we are one episode closer to the end of the season. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Maybe enjoyed is a weird word to use. I hope you got something out of this episode. And if you did, please like, share, and subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening over on your favorite podcast platform, please consider leaving a rating or review because that is super duper helpful. I forgot to tell you, we have reached our goal of 200 ratings and reviews. So whoop whoop, it's amazing. Thank you so much for that. That was awesome. Also, don't forget to join us on the live 5-year anniversary episode recording Q&A thingy thing, and don't forget to submit your questions. Don't forget about the History BFF trip, and if you would like to support the podcast in other ways, you can join us over on Patreon. You can get some fabulous merch. You can share this episode with your barista at your favorite coffee shop. Baristas love history podcasts. I know every single one of them does, so you could do that, and that's a really great free 99 way to support the podcast. And with that, that's what I got for you, friend. Remember to drink your water, to take care of yourself, do something nice. I know that you probably have been wanting to do a craft that you've just been like putting off, so do that craft. Do that craft while listening to another For the Love of History podcast episode. That would be a great idea. That would make your heart happy, and I want you to do things that make your heart happy, so please do that. Drink your water. I think I said that already, but we need another reminder. Okay, I'm going to take a sippy sip right now. Hydration. And I will see you next week for our 5-year anniversary live Q&A episode that will happen on Thursday, and then the episode will go out regularly on Friday. Okay, I love you so much. I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. 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 Mwah, mwah, mwah. Okay, I gotta use a marker to shut off the camera. Bye. Shut off, shut off, shut off. Don't think that's gonna work. Yeah, fake nails. Oh no, they're coming apart. We're falling apart. Every now and then I fall apart. And I need you more tonight. and I need you more than ever. Gosh diggity darn it. To the people who use press-ons and they stay on like really well, how do you do that? How is that possible for you? Who did you sell your soul to make that a thing that works in your life? Because it doesn't work in mine. They fall off so often I spontaneously turn British. That's what is happening here. Spontaneous British invasion into my lexicon. Would that be a cool band name? Spontaneous British Invasion? I think that'd be a sick ass name. Is that Meatloaf? I don't know. Ted, do you know if that's Meatloaf? We don't know about music. Commence with the great foodening. Did anybody watch? Hey, stay out of my water. You absolute monster, you little hydration thief. Back to the original point. Has anyone watched Invader Zim? Because that was my brother and I's absolute favorite television program when we were children. We had the box set. I think my dad got, because my dad loves it too. I think my dad got my brother. Gosh dang it. Do we have another issue right now? What am I saying? Oh, the Invader Zim box set that came in like the house from Invader Zim. My brother loved it and I loved it. I don't remember what the point of my story was anymore. I don't remember what the point of the story was. All I remember is we're talking about Invader Zim, but I don't know if it had a point, Teddy. I'm guessing it probably didn't have a point. The pointless conversations that I have with the people who watch the bloopers. Bloopers. Better get your bloopers. Oh, I feel like a bad mother. God damn it! I apologize for your new vocal stem. I apologize for your new vocal stem. It wasn't my intention to get something stuck in your head like okay. I have cat hair in my lipstick from this little cute ass baby. Oh brother, that's delicious.